Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us and for watching our New Jersey Shorts competition program. I'm very excited to announce our filmmakers that are here with us for our Q&A. So please join me in welcoming Rachel Harrison Gordon, director of Broken Bird. Pat Haywood, co-director of Gramercy. Robert Broadhurst, director of An Occurrence at Arvern.
Hello.
Chris Temple, co-director of The Undocumented Lawyer.
Thanks for having me.
And Andre Robert Lee, director of Virtually Free.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me here.
Hello, thank you all so much for joining us. I want to dive right in. We have a fun mix of documentary and fiction films here, so I'm going to try and keep these as general as I can to apply to both kinds of movies. But Rachel, I want to start with you and talk a little bit about where the idea for Broken Bird came from and how you got to Birdie's story on screen.
Sure. Thank you for having me. The story definitely came from my own life and upbringing. I'm really grateful to my parents for letting me borrow some of our memories and stories for this film. But the story reflects my experience of feeling kind of isolated, straddling a couple of worlds and feeling like I wasn't Black enough, white enough, or Jewish enough, depending on the circles that I was traveling in, and finding a way to kind of reconcile that and embrace the uniqueness of my situation. I think the actress and the character of Birdie are both, a hero I look up to. I think her resiliency is something I'm still trying to channel. And the process of making this film has actually made me feel more confident in this experience. So I think I'm just in love with film and its ability to allow you to process and share actually a specificity of a situation that a lot of people have related to, even if they don't come from the same background. So it's just been a really interesting time.
I love that. That's great. And then Pat, can you talk a little bit about Gramercy and how you and Jamil landed on Shaq's story here?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, yeah. Again, the to echo Rachel's sentiment, it's really lovely to be here with you all, and I guess the process started with Jamil and I both having experiences with dealing with grief and depression, and wanting to, and both having individual but also a kind of universal feeling of being in two places at once when your body is just here, and never really seeing that depicted in the way that we had felt it in our actual lives in cinema. And so, we were interested in kind of imagining a world where what it feels like to deal with grief and depression in the present moment, and not just think about it in terms of some linear timeline. What happened? Why did it happen? What's going to happen in the future, and dealing with grief and depression in the present moment and what it feels like to feel those things. So that was the starting point of kind of knowing that we wanted to make something about that. And then that's kind of the paint. I would say that's the canvas that we painted on. And then the paint came from Jamil went to college, Florida A&M University, with one of the actors in the film named Chad, and we went to visit him in his hometown of Piscataway, and we met all the people that you see in the movie or that's who they are. It's them playing themselves as first-time actors, and so it's kind of a 2 or 3 year process of us just going back and forth and getting to know them, and just casting the film through being there, and writing the film through being there. So it was sort of a fictionalized story on top of all of these non-fictional elements. So that was just kind of, finding our way in through that.
Mm-hmm. And then Robert, in An Occurrence at Arvern, it's such a topical story today, but how did you come about with deciding this was the angle that you wanted to take to tell this story?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, it was written actually in late 2018, and an unwatchable iteration of it was shot in late 2018, like 2 weeks after I wrote it, just because I was being a little crazy. I had been considering race and my own privilege for a while, by that time, and I hadn't made a personal project, and I knew it was going to be a lot of work if I did, as they all are. And so I was determined that if I was going to undertake a personal project, it was going to count and hopefully contribute to a dialogue. I personally find totally repugnant films like Green Book that rely on a white proxy character to reassure a white audience and allow them to avoid confronting the issue the movie purports to confront in the first place, which is their own culpability in a systemically racist system. And so I wanted to extract that white proxy character and put all the interpretive responsibility in the hands of a presumably white audience. That's who I was really going for. Obviously, I don't control who the audience is. So the question was, could I make a Rorschach to allow an audience to project and interpret, to possibly in a short runtime, uncover, maybe discover for the first time their own biases that they brought to the film.
Mm-hmm. You certainly left it all on the viewer to figure out what they thought was going on in there.
Yeah, it's definitely up to the viewer for sure.
Yeah. And then Chris, with an undocumented lawyer, can you talk a little bit about finding Lisbeth and developing her story into the short that we just saw?
Yeah, thank you. And this has been a 3-year project with a lot of people putting a lot of love into it beyond just myself, my co-director, Zach, our producing team, Jenna, Brenda, Claudia, our editor, Lila. So just want to thank all of them as well. We met Lisbeth back in 2017 when actually a friend of ours had arrived to the US and was looking for a lawyer to represent him in immigration court. And the first realization we had was that you're not guaranteed a lawyer in immigration court. And this kid was 16 years old, navigating this whole system by himself. So we started reaching out to friends and others, trying to find lawyers. And we came across a New York Times article about Lisbeth, and went and met with her in person, and immediately were struck that she was truly unique. I mean, her not only was she incredibly passionate, could she understand the issues that somebody was going through because she was undocumented herself, but above all, she was empowering her clients to know how to fight for themselves. And I think that type of narrative was really exciting to us, just to see undocumented voices lifting up other undocumented voices. And she, thankfully has kind of co-authored this piece with us for many years, with Adith, one of her clients as well, to try to bring this to life, and hopefully make a difference on the narrative. So it's just been a pleasure working on it.
Great. And she's just such a wonderful character, a wonderful person.
Yeah, she really is. We have her almost on all of the Q&As. She's out speaking almost daily on 1 or 2 Zoom calls right now, doing screenings and just sharing her story and hopefully inspiring others.
That's great. And then Andre, can you talk a little bit about what drew you to these incarcerated teens and this organization that's trying to help them that led to Making Virtually Free?
Yeah, thanks for that. I gotta give a shout out to everyone in this Zoom call. These films sound amazing, and I'm so honored to be here with you all. Thank you for making work that is about changing and improving the world. That's what I've committed to with my films. So Virtually Free, I was very unprofessional when I got the first phone call about it. They said, hey, we have the project about incarcerated teens in Richmond, Virginia, who come out of their prison cells to make art to fight against recidivism. Instead of being like, let me think about it, I was like, yeah, sign me up. Because it's such a grand and beautiful idea. I was drawn into it because with all my work, I'm really deeply committed to trying to make a change, trying to go from moments to movements, and trying to, ratify, change, enforce new systems, ways of being, and deconstruct some of these systems we have in place. I think to echo or amplify some of what Robert talked about of retelling stories and restructuring, it's up to us to go forward and take a part. So when I learned about Performing Statistics, the group that was training the children to use art, I thought, okay, this is a really grand idea. And what they did is they used their art to actually talk to police officers, legislators, and local people about what it means to put a teenager in jail. I went into this project thinking, I know about jail because I have relatives who have been in jail. My father was in jail for a little while. Being a Black man in America, statistically speaking, sadly, I know people in jail. And when I worked on this film, I learned that I didn't really know about jail and how intense the system truly is, and what it does to individuals and takes away from them. So my hope with this is that it's a call to action to people. They think about what they can do. You don't have to do something as large as what performance statistics did, but you can find out individually what you can do to, children shouldn't be in prison. I really stand by that. I don't think little kids should be in prison. And these are not young men and young women. These are little kids that are incarcerated. We got to do something about it.
Yeah, it's so clear listening to their interviews too that they really are just children.
Yeah, totally. When I first met them, they all came in acting kind of tough the first day. And within minutes of them playing with the art, I was like, these are little boys. These are little boys, like running around playing with each other, hiding and enjoying stuff that little boys do. And yet they leave this space and go back to the prison cell. Not okay. Not okay.
Yeah. Kind of on that note, I want to talk about characters because they're so important to your stories, both fiction and the documentaries. So Rachel, coming back to you and basing Birdie off of yourself, I'd love to hear a little bit about developing the character on the page and then working with your actress to get both your experience true to life and also her own interpretation on the tale.
Definitely. Her life is very similar to my own, and her dad's white and her mom's black, so it's kind of a reversal there. She's half Jewish. She didn't get a bat mitzvah, and she was 12, the age that you're supposed to, and she had two older sisters who did, and she was like, not feeling it, it's not for me. And then after we made the film, she actually did get a bat mitzvah, so I don't know, maybe something rubbed off on her. But I do remember, because the story is autobiographical, on paper, the film actually had a lot more of the parents in it because I was very protective of each of them, and I wanted people to understand the motivations behind what they do and for neither of them to be an enemy. I think the father, I was super hesitant to have an ending where he failed to live up to his promise because I didn't want to perpetuate this image of Black men saying they're going to do something and not. And I think through working with the actors, through communicating this story that he's really the hero, I think we were able to achieve an ending in tone where he is a hero to her. He is what enables her to walk into that temple and feel like, this is me and I can do this. So I think by being very vulnerable with the cast and crew, who was really supportive, and when we were running into some logistical issues or whatever, they were like right behind me when I was trying to fight people. So I think it was just a really wonderful team effort and validating to share something so personal. I know at school when I was workshopping this, it was the opposite. There's definitely a stigma about personal stories, about day in the life stories. And I was getting kind of polarizing feedback from professors who were like, it needs to follow this 3-act structure. And from people who looked like me that were like, wow, I've never seen something like this on screen before. And you just have to choose kind of which community to listen to. And I think that's what really got this to where it is now.
Yeah, that's great. And kind of on a similar note with you, Pat, as you were talking about Gramercy and working with your actors who are basically playing themselves, what was the process like with you guys getting them comfortable enough to really give such raw emotional performances on screen and what is essentially playing themselves on screen?
I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to trust and to committing yourself to the honesty of yourself, but then also kind of trusting your instincts about what you're seeing and being willing to let go of control. I think such a big part of making Gramercy for me and Jamil was learning to not feel like you have to control everything, and to let go and to drop what you thought you might have wanted something to be or what you hope you want something to be, and to just be there with it, and to just be there. And I think so much of our rehearsal process was, a lot of it on a technical level was improvisational, and we would, go back and forth, and we would write a scene and have them read it back and forth and be like, well, that doesn't sound like anything any human being would ever say. And then, them putting it in their own words and, doing that to the point where we got on set and there was a freedom there. And it was, the fact that these young men have known each other since they were kids. It just, Jamil and I didn't need to cultivate that. That existed. And I think kind of taking your fist from here, this is a filmmaker, you want everything here and everything, and then you just let go and it's just magic happens. And so many of those moments I feel like on set, it's, that's why you make movies. And I remember there was a moment when we were shooting the last scene, which is at a gas station. The whole shoot was very, very emotional and very stressful. I mean, as any film was, but our film, compared to some of the other films that we shot, was particularly stressful. And I remember a moment where, Shaq and I were standing next to each other, and I just had this thought. It was right before we shot the last frame, and I was like, I had this thought that this entire process between Jamil, Shaq, and I had been all of us giving our entire selves over to this thing that we were making, this art, and in a way we were each telling each other's story, so like Jamil and Shaq were there telling my story, and Shaq was telling Jamil and I's story, and Jamil was telling me and Shaq's story. And it was this moment of like, holy mackerel, I can't believe we've all put so much time into just making this thing it's not more one of us than the other. It's everybody. And I think again, back to that idea of just letting go of control and just, allowing for space for humanity to exist. That was so much of the process. And I'm glad to hear that you thought it resonated in an emotional and real way on screen.
Yeah, it's impressive what you're able to get out of non-actors as well, just in that raw, beautiful, emotional place. So, yeah. And then, Robert, I'd imagine it must have been tricky with you and your lead actor who's got to play something in such an interpretive way. What was it like working with him so that he could get the material, out of the page and onto the screen, but in such a way that it's up to the viewer to interpret what they think he's doing?
Yeah, great question. So Curtis is great. He's a really talented, intuitive actor and also methodical, but not method. We had cast him maybe 7 days before we shot. I think we had gotten together for like a single rehearsal. His partner had their first child like 5 days before we shot. And I think he told me the day he arrived that conservatively that week he had like 2 hours of sleep. So shout out to him for just being incredible. But in terms of the writing of it, the whole exercise is modulating the tension between sort of ambiguity and clarity. So, by the end of viewing the film, you have to be able to look back and say like, all right, all of his behavior is totally reasonable, knowing what I now know. But he had to sort of like, how to phrase this? I mean, he had to not do anything that was criminal. We had a rule that like he couldn't cheat any sort of performance in the first half of it. He couldn't do anything that was extra shady seeming. Everything he did had to be justifiable given the context of his situation. And then, once he starts talking, you learn all about him. And then it was a question of like, all right, how rich of a life can I build given the very few minutes of screen time that this character has? And how can I do it while he's having a one-sided conversation in a way that feels plausible and not too exposition laden and sort of forced and all of that. So the challenges were like managing the ambiguity and the clarity, and also creating a life that felt rich and full, or at least as much as it could given the confines of a short film, and especially given the confines of the screen time that he actually had in the situation that he was in, which was like talking on the phone and doing some really banal stuff.
Yeah, he doesn't do much, but it lets your mind wander.
Yeah, and his journey is completely different than the journey the viewers are going on, right? He's living in a completely different reality than everybody watching it. So he's up to, I mean, he's doing a boring thing. For the audience, it's very, very tense because they have information that he doesn't have.
Right. And then Chris, with Lisbeth and her family and her clients, was there any hesitation on their part in taking part of this this documentary? Because they also are dealing with some very real emotional topics, and they're very open with you. So I'd love to hear a little bit about the process of working with her and getting your subjects to open up in the way that they did.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, this film has really been driven by Lisbeth from day one. I mean, we went and had lunch, and she was ready to share her story. And, obviously, she just did a Q&A yesterday, so I'll kind of repeat a little bit of what she shared, that obviously there's always risk to her. She has no legal protection right now, right? So doing this film or being out there, there is risk that ICE could come to deport her family, could enlist fines, could go after anybody and make her life very difficult. That said, and as she expands on in the film, she truly believes that being public and being in the forefront, being connected to media, if something does happen, your community will know. And she believes and has been talking for years as an activist about the importance of coming out of the shadows and being willing to put the story forward and to kind of be an example for other people who may be undocumented out there, who are too scared to go to university or who are too scared to realize their dreams if they don't have DACA or any sort of protection. So I think, again, like she said yesterday, she really wants to be this example for others to not be so afraid and to incrementally push forward some of this change by many ways, normalizing this reality that there are people like so many millions of people like Lisbeth who came to the United States as children, have lived here their whole lives. Their identity is intertwined in these communities, and to be able to put that out there publicly. And we're really thankful that this film was just picked up this week by HBO. So that will be releasing in March of 2021. We're extremely thankful to them as a partner because they're also allowing us to do virtual screenings for Impact all this fall and until the release on HBO. So we already have about 65 events set up with nonprofits, sanctuary churches, schools, just community groups who want to bring this film into their community, start a dialogue, and then also every event is a fundraiser for her legal fund for asylum seekers. So the goal is to tangibly have this film create change, and we hope that it can do that. So if anybody wants to book a screening after this, go to undocumentedlawyer.org, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible.
So exciting! Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Very exciting. And then Andre, with Virtually Free, we were talking about how you're dealing with such young kids. I would love to hear a little bit about working with them. I'd imagine there was maybe some moments where it was hard to get them to, be serious and focused so you can get the kind of interviews that you want with them. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your process of getting to know them and letting them open up enough that you could get the material that you wanted for your documentary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. I'm just reveling in once again with all the people sharing. I want to be like, I'm so glad to be here. It's so pretty cool. It's interesting. We first approached the Richmond and the gallery and the performing statistics. They all were very looking at us sideways, like, and you are, they were open to the process. But they also were very concerned about us coming in and filming. We actually did not have the right to show the children's faces at all for 90% of the time that we were filming. We were told that you could not show the children's faces. And so my DP, my producers, they all were freaking out. And I was trying to remain calm. And it was a very okay, get 60% sneak their faces, 40% get their hands over the shoulder, show their feet, show them in the distance. And the reason is because their images belong to the state. And the state would not allow us to show their images. Yeah, when I heard that, I was like, whoa. The secondary piece, which may be more important, was when a child is detained, a child is not incarcerated, they're detained. That's official language. Their cases are and records are expunged after their release. So the thought is, if you're documenting these children as they're detained, you're marking that forever, that these were children who got in trouble. So I got that. After spending time with them and them opening up, everyone was watching us carefully. You meet in the movie Gina, and Gina was mama hen. Gina was very like, these children are very dear to me, very important. They're also traumatized. These children are incarcerated, in and out of the detention center. So we have to be very careful with them. So I came in, I'm an educator, I came in wanting to teach and this and that, and I had to really step back. And what you'll see in the film is, or what you may have seen in the film, is that it's a hybrid type film where there's verite and there's some talking heads. And we actually we went to one kid's house. We couldn't get into a lot of children's houses. Their parents were kind of like, yay, nay. One family finally shared with us, she said, look, check it out. You all are coming from New York down here filming, you want to make your project. The folks on the block will see you come into the house with your cameras. And some of these children have not released all they know. They'll see cameras. They may think you're putting them in danger, therefore our kids will be in danger. So you can't come over. What do you say to that? Like, yeah, okay, we won't come over. I get it, I totally get it. So we had to be very creative and get most of what we got in the spaces where they were brought to us, and then spend time like using the city itself of Richmond, Virginia to tell the story. We spent a lot of time on what is formerly Monument Avenue, I guess you would say. It's incredible to think that all those monuments are all either coming down or down, because that tells a really intense story. Richmond's the former capital of Confederacy, the second one. And those monuments are up there with a real direct statement. And then add that into, going back to the film, a good 97% of the children incarcerated in Richmond, Virginia were African American and Latino. Do the math, So the teens were exciting. They really loved my camera guy, Brendan. They called him cameraman. Hey, cameraman, what's up? And they did the whole thing of like, hey, we had to say to them, look, check it out. We're not making love and hip hop. We're making a serious documentary. This is not about you performing and going on. And they got that after a while. And you know what? We became endearing to them. And I have to say this, and I was told this by the various artists, it meant a lot to them to seeing a Black man come in there in charge of a production. Like that was something they were like, just be here, Andre. Them seeing you has had more than enough. And I jumped in and I talked a little bit about what was happening with the children and tried to involve a little bit, but I had to really stay back and be the filmmaker and not interrupt and not break that wall, to respect the process and respect what the children were going through. Yeah.
Of course. Well, I wish we could keep talking, but unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you all so much for joining us today and for sharing your beautiful films with us. I'm very excited that we can feature them in our New Jersey Films competition, our very first shorts competition. Very exciting. So thank you all for watching, and we hope to see you back soon on our virtual cinema.
Good luck, everybody.